Happy Friday, folks. Pat here with Great Circle Learning. Wanted to, thank you for joining me on what I'm considering the last Friday of the summer. And I'm just making sure everything is, I'm hearing something coming through. So, sorry. Just want to mute the sound so that we don't have reverb like we did a couple weeks ago. But for me, last week of summer, right? It's, well, because my kids go back to school next week, which is like lights coming down from the sky. It'll be nice. It'll be good to be back to a little bit of less chaos, right? Maybe some more consistency. And that's what we're talking about today, is consistency, right? So how do we get more consistency in our training? And I'm looking at it from an ILT and VILT standpoint, but it's really consistency across our whole training department, right? What we're doing in e-learning, what we're doing in micro-learning. It's really a mindset. And so this is one, this stream is really more so about giving you some things to think about and how to, maybe some ways to apply it. But what I'd love, if you can take a few moments, let me know where you're coming in from in the chat. And again, still pointing to the screen like you can see where I'm pointing. Or, where do you think you're coming up with maybe a little bit of, lack of consistency? Love to kind of dive into some of that today as well. I will point out, and it's actually at the moment, it's over here because I can't point, my little monitor that, puts up some things, but also shows some of my stats. I am 2 subscribers away from hitting my goal of 100, which allows me to then brand the YouTube channel into my name instead of like a whole series of numbers and letters. So if you are watching this and you're not, if you find any value on this, if you can, head over to the YouTube channel, and I will put this, for those who are on the channel, just hit the subscribe button. But if you're watching this on LinkedIn, I'm going to put that in to the chat so you guys can take a few moments and, watch it through there. But, or subscribe through there. I'd love to see that get to 100. But that's my shameless plug for this for right now. All right, so let's dive into this, right? Consistency. So first thing we want to look at is, what does consistency look like in the world of ILT and VILT? And so I broke this down really into 4 audiences, right? If you think about some of the things I've talked about, that we need to consider 4 audiences when we're building our training materials, right? Amazingly, like I try to circle everything back, like it's like one big onion and we're peeling back the layers. All right. So if we can, let me see, the first one that we're going to look at, and I'm just double checking, make sure we've got sound coming through and it looks like everything's good there. All right. So what does consistency look like for facilitators, right? And so the way I would look at this as, facilitator, I'd put it as producer, right? Someone who is actively leading or facilitating our training, right? For them, consistency is having everything at their fingertips. When they need it, it is right there. They're not having to go search for it. They don't have to find it. We've set them up so that they can pick a book off the shelf, pick the training program off the shelf, download it off the LMS, and they've got the PDF of it. But everything that they need to successfully run a program is in one location. So that's one way consistency is going to be there, right? So things like pre-work, how to use the tools, right? We're doing this virtual training in Zoom, and maybe this is a new facilitator. How do we use the breakout room in Zoom? Or how do we do, breakout rooms or polling in Teams? All of that is in one location where they know and where they can find it. So consistently, they have what they need to do their job successfully. And then also the idea of being able to quickly have the information at a glance, right? So today I'm doing it off of handwritten notes, but they can quickly glance down, they get their information, they're right back up. It's been a crazy week. I haven't had a chance to flush all of this out like I normally would. But that's, for a facilitator, that's what consistency looks like. And if you think there's some other items, let me know. Throw it up in that chat. All right, next one. What does consistency look like for the learner? And the ones that I've come up with this is, they know what to expect. they can, going into training consistently, they know why they're there, what they're expected to get out of it, and maybe and the objectives or performance outcomes that are going to come from it, right? We can use that to consistently drive engagement or effectiveness because the learners know what they're going into and they know what they're going to be getting out of it, right? They're looking for some standards, right? They want standards or patterns that they can recognize. Humans in general strive for comfort, right? They look for patterns in things that they do. Think about when you went to the grocery store. Do you walk the grocery store in the same pattern each time? Which aisles you go up, which ones you come down, and then get flustered when someone's blocking it and you got to turn around and now you're going the other way and you've broken your pattern? It's something that humans look for. And if we're setting up our trainings and there isn't patterns in there that your learners can recognize, you're causing some strife for them right off the bat, right? Maybe in the world of e-learning, right? Do we have kind of a standard of what our look and feel and kind of time frames that we try to achieve things in? And obviously time frames is really driven by the outcomes. But if we're not setting up these patterns, these standards for the learners to find comfort in, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice, right? We're already creating some dissonance with that learner. They're also going to look, they want training that's going to meet their needs, what they're trying to achieve, right? So we want to make sure, again, clearly lay out what they're going to get out of this training, what to expect or what they can expect from it. And then lastly, we want, keep in mind those, what the specific needs are, right? They want things that are tied to their job. They're looking for job development. So the more we can drive these factors consistently to them, right? If we build training 1 and we're saying, here's how it's going to improve what you're doing in your work, or here's how it's getting you to the position that you want to be in, but now training 2 that they go to, that's not in there. Well, again, we've created dissonance and they're not maybe we're getting less engagement. They're going to be less excited to be there. So the more we can consistently show what's in it for them, the better chance we have of them being engaged and them being effective, or the training being effective. All right. And actually, so before we dive into the developer, let's look here. So Teresa coming in. Yes, I like to know the agenda for training, especially if I'm expected to actively participate. That's a great one, right? We build training, how do we build, how do we get people engaged? A lot of times it's like, hey, let's do this activity, which is awesome if you're an extrovert, right? But what if the people are introverts? You may have just completely pushed them away, right? So how do we consistently meet the needs of all our learners, right? Sometimes there are going to be activities that they have to actively participate in. Well, so like Teresa said, letting them know up front is a better way so that they can be prepared and maybe step outside of their little comfort zone, right? There's a little bit of surprise for them. That's another thing. Humans like comfort. They also like surprise. The third thing they like is completion. So if we can tie all 3 of those things in, we have a much better chance of grabbing and holding their attention. But for the developer, let's talk about consistency, right? One is let's not every time give them different tools to use, right? So, hey, developer, hey, subject matter expert, I need information from you. Today I need it as a Google Doc. You know what? Next time, hey, can you load this up into Slack for me? Can you use Articulate? Can you use PowerPoint? We need to consistently, and consistently doesn't mean 100%, but use the same tools so that we can develop skills with those and we get familiarity with it, which is then going to help them do their job quicker. They can spend more time on specific things that they need to do, and they're not spending time on how do I use this tool and things like that. All right. We also want to make sure that we have a systematic process, right? How do we go and make it so that consistently we build the same way, each and every time? And that each and every time, to me, is that my 90% rule. Like 90% of the time, this is what I do. So that I don't have to think about it. I can this is how we go about building, right? We build virtual training this way. We build e-learning this way 90% of the time. And now I have the ability to just put my energy into the material and not on how am I laying this out? How should I do this? Right? It's, why layout and formatting matters and how we do things. So consistency for developers is just that systematic process that they can dive into. And then high level, let's look at the organization, right? So for consistency for an organization, I would say, how do we make sure our training is tied to mission values, mission and values of the organization, right? I think organizationally wise, we should be tying our job roles to our competencies. And so then when we create our training, the training is driving towards those competencies. And so for the organization, it's, for me, consistency is a little bit more high levels, the way I'm looking at it. And again, if you disagree, you agree, you've got something else, Pat, you're just full of whatever, let me know. And then lastly, basically they want to make sure we have a happier and a more engaged workforce, right? If they're more engaged, if they're happier, and how do you put in happy? How do you rate happiness? That's a whole other conversation. But with that, the organization has a better chance of retention. Retention has a better chance of having more developed employees, which means they're doing their jobs more effectively, which hopefully means better, which is driving to better outcomes, right? So consistency for the organization is really driving at the outcome level of the organization. All right. So now, how do we become more consistent? And again, we're going to look at this, the way I kind of thought about this today was looking at it from these audience points of views, right? So let's dive back into the facilitator and, take a moment right now, like, let me know, put in chat, like, how do you see yourself or your organization or as the developer, what could you do right now to be more consistent, right? The fact of you just typing it out and putting it into words is going to help you make this more, make it more real for you, right? The fact when we write our goals out, we have a better chance of achieving them because we've actually put them into the space, right? So you want to be more consistent? Hey, throw it up there. You can hold yourself more accountable because it's written down. Let's see, what do we have? Is it Marcello? Thank you for coming from Atlanta. I used to live there for years, right over by the old Turner Field. So thank you. Let me know what you think. What could you do to be more consistent? All right. So at the facilitator level, we want to get to be more consistent. We want to look to get more buy-in on the whole process of delivering our training, right? So, and what do I mean by this? Think about the times training's been built out and you've laid out we're going to be doing this activity and I want you to be saying this and we're going to be doing this. And now the facilitator, maybe they've been a seasoned facilitator, they've done it their way for so long, and you want to try a different way of going about it. The facilitator gets it, they look at it, and they go back and do exactly what they want, right? Best, think, hey, I'm going to jump back to my kids. Like, hey, we need to, after you guys make food, wash the dishes, wash out your dish, put it into the dishwasher, right? New process. Because what they've previously been doing is making food, leaving it on the counter, food smeared everywhere because they can't figure out how to get all the food right into the dish. And then they're done and they leave it, right? So we implement a new process, and then guess what? They go back and they continue to do what they did. So as a facilitator, that's really bad analogy. That's an issue I had last night, and this morning and the day before, right? So that's consistently an issue with my kids and dishes. But the idea is, as a facilitator, you need to buy into change, right? The more we can do this, the more we can consistently drive what we're trying to achieve. All right, the other ones that I have down, like the other one, like that old statement, how do you get to Carnegie Hall, right? So for facilitators, practice, practice, practice. You want to be more consistent on doing these things. Spend more time, practicing doing it. Run through it. Don't lead, if you have an option to lead a course 4 times, do it. First one could be a train wreck, right? By the 4th, it's going to be so much better. So the more we do it, the better we get at it, right? So be consistent in doing these things. And the last one, stay on target, right? If I had more time, I would have pulled up the clip from Star Wars where they're flying down that channel and they're about to blow up the Death Star, and you guys can see how much of a nerd I am right now because this is where I went. But stay on target, because if we stray, right? You've designed a course. Hey, it's a virtual training course. We got 45 minutes, and now we're talking about XYZ, and you jump off into a tangential story. Now we're off topic, right? So it's not a consistent process because our learners aren't getting what they need, right? Now you've led this course and I'm leading the same course but in another location virtually. And it's now the people didn't get consistent training because you went one way, you went left when everyone else was going right. So stay on target. Now, if you disagree with what's happening, great. I'm not saying to just, be an automaton, but that stuff needs to happen in the development phase, right? As you're going back and forth and you're doing this, and maybe in some of your practice runs, and say, hey, we really need to tweak this. This isn't getting us to where we need to go. Or it happens in the evaluation phase before we circle back and make changes and, implement it for round 2 of the training. But when it comes time to do the training, we need to follow the script, right? I'm not saying the script needs to be 100% verbatim, unless let's say you're teaching the Miranda rights, then it does. But you need to stay on the path that was designed and developed for this program. All right, learner. All right, so in the learner, I think this one's a little bit, and I kind of set myself up here and like, hey, I'm going to throw, these 2 items, how do we become more consistent? And then what does consistency look like that we just went through? And I'm like, hey, I'm going to do it by the 4 audiences. And maybe, I may be trying to shoehorn a couple things in here. But for the learner, the more we can deliver on what we say we're going to do, the learner is going to get more trust in the whole training process. If we say, hey, you're doing this training and here's what you're going to get out of it, right? Trying to get their buy-in, right? Show what's in it for them. The more we deliver on that what's in it for them, the more they're going to have trust in the process. I think one of the issues with why training and development kind of has a bad vibe in a lot of places, right? Go back to that, the parent company for TikTok, who fired their entire L&D department at the end of last year, beginning of this year, because no one saw any benefit in what they were doing, is because people, they weren't able to see what was in it for them, right? We didn't consistently, or they weren't consistently, promise something in training and then walk away with that. So the more we can be consistent in providing them what we're saying we're going to provide to them, they see the benefit of it, they're going to be more apt to consistently be engaged on the next training instead of being like, why do I have to come to this? Right? So that's for the learner. All right. So basically, the more we can meet the objectives and the performance outcomes, and they get the growth that they're expecting, or maybe surprise, get more than they were expecting, the better off they're going to be. And we're going to consistently get better buy-in from them. All right. Third one, the developer. So on this one, we need to take a systematic approach, right? How do we systematically build our material? Whether it's the actual program, design out our program through design documents, through development, right? Like how do we lay out our guidebooks? How do we lay out our screens, our pods, whatever tool you're using, Zoom, you're using, Adobe Connect, you're using Teams. How do we lay all that out so we have a seamless process? But we need to do it systematically, right? The more we can do it systematically, the more consistent we can be. So high level, think of this, systematically, like it could be ADDIE, like are we doing analysis, are we doing design, development, then when we implement it and then evaluate it? Or it's at that level, but it's also at the actual development level, right? So like what's our process for building the supplemental workbooks that go along with that virtual training, right? Or what about that job aid that we use when we build out our e-learning? All right, so what's our process for that? So if you don't have one, you need one. I've talked about this before, and we'll talk about it more, but come up with a process. And then, the other one I'd say is make sure we're keeping track of data. How do we go through and make sure that that we're keeping track of everything that we're doing? How long does it take? What were we doing? How long does it take? What was our cost to do this? Right? The more we can understand all the information, or I guess first, once we have all the information, we can better look at it and say, hey, here is how we should go through and make changes, because we actually have data to pull from. And we're going to talk about that one in just a few moments. And lastly, in becoming more consistent on the organizational level, basically, you need to stay the course. How many organizations have you worked at or been a part of, or training initiatives that have been built that, you invest all this time, you take people away from their jobs, run them through it, and then for whatever reason, nothing happens. It's a dead end, right? Maybe there's a new CEO and now we're going a different way. Or, numbers came out, the quarterly numbers came out that were reported to shareholders, and now we need to go a different way. Like, the more organizations have this circuitous, or not a straight course, the worse, the less consistent you have, people are going to be less apt to take advantage of other programs or buy into other programs that you're running. So as an organization, we really need to not be kind of wishy-washy on which route we're going. Like, pick a course and stay on that course for a while until it's proven that we need to make a change, right? Proven with data. All right. The other one I'd say, to be more consistent, tie those job roles to competencies and then hire people for those competencies, right? So if we tie job roles to competencies, we hire people off those competencies or the strengths that go towards those competencies, and then train towards those competencies, you're going to drive performance improvement. You're going to get to your performance outcomes, your learning objectives, your business objectives quicker and easier and better. Tie your competencies to your job roles. So those are I think high level, easier ways, things to consider to try to be more consistent. This one, consistency does not equal perfection. I think, this one's fairly straightforward, but I think it's a big trap that everyone falls into, right? It's one that just because we're hey, I'm going to live stream every Friday, right? And for the most part, I do. But if I miss it for a Friday because I was sick or I'm going on vacation, it's okay. Like, to not be perfect is life, right? No one's perfect. Take baseball, for example, right? So in baseball, the absolute all-time best hitter hit 406 in a year. So to put that into numbers, out of every 10 at-bats, he only got a hit 4 times on average, right? So 6 times he got out. That is the all-time best hitter in baseball. Ted Williams did it in 1941. No one since that in 81 years has gotten that good. So 6 out of 10 times he failed, right? So consistency doesn't equal perfection. So the more we can buy into that, you can buy into that concept, it's the better you're going to be off, right? So you don't feel bad like, hey, I only got it 8 out of 10 times. Like I was trying to do this, every Monday I wanted to do XYZ. And I only got it, 3 out of 4 of the Mondays in the month. Great. That's awesome. You're consistently doing, and when you're off, you acknowledge it. Maybe it's just internally, and then you keep going forward. So consistency doesn't equal perfection. All right. And the last one I have for today is the idea that the more consistent we can be, the more we can build consistency in what we do, the better chance we have of making change. It's easier to make edits. It's easier to be more effective because consistency gives us data, right? It allows us to compare apples to apples, right? If I always go about, let's say, building guidebooks, right? And I always, let's say in a guidebook, I always have, I'm going to say something, and then we're going to run an activity. And then after every activity, we do a debrief, right? Or in e-learning, like we always go about, we have them, we present a point, and then after that point, there's a question, and then they go to the next key point, and then there's a question, and then we sum it up with, let's say a review quiz at the end, that we can now look and say, hey, do we need to ask those questions after every key point in that e-learning? Or do we need to do a debrief after each one of those? We've done this consistently. Now, take one and change it. Drop out that question in between and see what happens, right? Or we can change up. We can, something. We always are running that debrief, but we completely get off track, and we never hit our time frames. Okay, well, what happens if we take that debrief out, or we shorten that debrief up, right? We can make small changes and then see the effects after a couple times of doing it. So by doing things consistently, it gives us the ability to make a change to then see how that consistent, what that does, what the ripple effect down the line is. So those small adjustments can make a huge difference. To get consistent, it's not about large change. It's making small things. Like, I'm going to make my bed every morning, right? Not a huge thing. Like, take some minute out of your day, make your bed. Small thing, but consistently, the more we do it, the more consistent we get. I'm not saying you have to make your bed every day. You should. But if you don't, no, it's not my bed, so I don't care. But the more we can, the more you can actively try to be consistent in what you do, I think your life's going to be easier. The way we build ILT and VILT is going to definitely be easier. So that's kind of, it's one that it's a hard one to talk about. I find, like, how do we talk about consistency, or how do we demonstrate consistency in, like, a live stream, in a Zoom meeting, or something like that. But it's such a paramount piece that I want to always kind of come back to it. But I got to find a better way to kind of tell this story. I don't know. Like, I don't know. If you can think of a better way for me to talk about consistency, let me know, because consistently, I feel like my talk on consistency kind of meanders. but it's such an important one that I got to figure out a better way to put it into words. But that being said, I know we're right at the half hour where we like to be. At any point, if you need anything from me, there's my phone number. If I can point right, there's my email. Reach out to me. Let me know. Actually, before we hop forward, let's see. We had a couple other things come in. Marcello, great question. I'm already working on it by aligning myself with an accountability partner. There's a great accountability. Who can we get on board with us being more consistent or on whatever we're trying to do? Having two people or more working towards a similar goal, because where one starts to stray, the other one can pull them back, and vice versa. Huge one. So Marcello, that's awesome. Accountability partners, a great way to go. And then from Teresa, sounds like developing standard operating procedures can help with consistency. Absolutely. I mean, to be honest, it's why the military does them, right? Not saying that the military is the most effective or, the best example, but standard operating procedures gives us a baseline, something that we can build off of. Doesn't mean that 100% of the time it's that 90% rule. 90% of the time, these standard operating procedures are in place, so we don't have to put our energy and thought into that. We can put it into, what those are driving us towards. And now 10% of the time when those standard operating procedures don't work, we can put energy into the other way to go about it. But with that, folks, I'm 2 minutes over what what I've put into place as a 30-minute time frame. So I want to give you back the last Friday, the remainder of this hour in the last Friday of August. And I will see you guys all next Friday. All right. Take care, folks.